The phone buzzed against Ryan Kellerman's hip as he dragged his mop across the marble floors of Chicago's Pinnacle Tower, 38 floors up, past midnight, the building breathing emptiness around him. He glanced at the screen, unknown number from Michigan, his thumb hovering before something pulled him to answer. "Hello, met we spreken?" The Dutch words rolled off his tongue like silk, natural and flawless, while behind the floor-to-ceiling glass of Cross Dynamics Industries, Adrienne Cross, billionaire, CEO, empire builder, stopped dead, her pen clattering to the mahogany conference table. She'd been hunting for weeks, desperate, knowing tomorrow's Dutch consortium deal could make or break her company, every translator in Chicago failing her cultural demands. And here stood a janitor speaking Dutch like he was born in Amsterdam. Ryan ended the call, returned to his mop, while Adrienne pressed her palm against the glass, heart hammering as she made a choice that would shatter everything they thought they knew about each other. The office door clicked open. "Wait." Ryan's shoulders tensed as that voice cut through the midnight silence. He'd heard that tone before, authority wrapped in expensive silk, power disguised as politeness. The kind of voice that belonged to someone who'd never pushed a mop or counted quarters for groceries. He straightened slowly, his weathered hands tightening on the handle, while water droplets fell like accusations onto pristine marble. "I'm sorry, Mom. Did I disturb you? I can come back later." The words carried practiced deference, but his grey eyes held something deeper, older, like storm clouds that had learned to hide lightning. Adrienne studied the man before her with laser focus, broad shoulders beneath faded blue uniform, calloused hands that moved with military precision despite the humble work. Dark hair showing premature grey at the temples, stress grey, not age grey. Nothing about him suggested the sophisticated cultural awareness that had just flowed from his lips like vintage wine. She'd interviewed Harvard graduates who couldn't achieve that level of nuanced understanding. "That was Dutch," she said, stepping closer, her voice sharp as surgical steel. "You were speaking Dutch, fluently." Ryan turned to face her, and their eyes met for the first time. His were the kind that had seen too much, carried too many ghosts. "Yes, Mom. Just an old friend calling from Michigan." He offered no elaboration, no explanation for why a janitor would receive international calls in languages most Americans had never heard spoken. The silence stretched between them like a bridge neither wanted to cross. Around them, 38 floors of steel and glass held its breath, waiting for something to break. "I have a crucial meeting tomorrow morning," Adrienne said finally, business instincts overriding curiosity. "Dutch partners from the Innovation Consortium. My translator cancelled 3 hours ago." Her voice carried an undertone she'd never admit to. Desperation. This wasn't just business. This was 18 months of negotiations that could validate everything she'd built or expose her as someone who'd reached too far. "I'm in trouble, and I think you might be the solution I didn't know I was looking for." Ryan's laugh held no humor, just recognition of life's cruel timing. "I'm just the janitor, Mom. You need someone professional, someone with credentials." He gestured to his uniform, to everything that marked him as invisible in her world. But his eyes told a different story. They held the weight of someone who understood exactly what she was asking. "Some doors shouldn't be opened, Ms. Cross. Some bridges lead to places you can't come back from. What if it could be more than that? Just for tomorrow. Name your price." The words escaped before Adrienne could stop them. She watched his face carefully, looking for greed or opportunism. Instead, she saw something that surprised her. Fear. Not the fear of someone caught in a lie, but the deeper terror of someone who'd spent years building walls. "I'll pay whatever it takes. I'm that desperate." The admission tasted foreign on her tongue. Adrienne Cross didn't do desperate. The elevator arrived with a soft chime that sounded like a bell tolling midnight. As Ryan stepped inside, he glimpsed Adrienne still standing in the hallway, her business card in her outstretched hand like a peace offering. Conference room 3805, 9 a.m. sharp, if you change your mind. The card fluttered to the marble floor between them. Neither moved to pick it up. The building held its breath as the elevator doors closed, sealing them on opposite sides of a choice that would change everything. 6 a.m. came too early and too quietly. Ryan stood at his kitchen window, coffee growing cold while he watched Hazel press her face against the glass, counting delivery trucks with methodical precision. Morning light caught dust motes dancing between them, and for a moment, life felt almost normal, almost safe. "Daddy, Mrs. Patterson says you got a fancy job offer last night," Hazel said, her 10-year-old voice carrying curiosity and concern in equal measure. She'd learned to read his emotional weather patterns, had developed the kind of hypervigilance no child should need. "Just someone who needs help with a meeting, sweetheart," Ryan replied, pouring coffee into his thermos with hands that remained steady despite the tremor in his chest. How do you explain to a child that sometimes running from opportunity is the safest choice? That some doors, once opened, can never be closed again? Nothing fancy, nothing that would change anything important. The lie tasted bitter, but it was kinder than the truth. That he was terrified of becoming someone she might not recognize. Hazel turned from the window, her dark eyes, Christine's eyes, studying him with uncomfortable perception. "But you're scared. You get that look when you're scared, like when thunder gets too loud." She'd become his early warning system, learned to predict his storms before they broke. Mom used to say careful and scared look the same from the outside. The observation hit him like a physical blow. Christine had always seen through his defenses without trying to tear them down. By 8:30, Ryan stood outside Pinnacle Tower wearing his only suit, charcoal grey relic from Christine's funeral, still carrying the faint scent of that terrible day. The building looked different in daylight, less imposing, more like steel and glass dreams of people who'd never learned that some victories cost more than defeat. The elevator ride to 38 felt like ascending to another planet, one where air was thinner and stakes were measured in millions. His reflection stared back, a man playing dress-up in clothes that belonged to someone he used to be. Adrienne was waiting in the conference room, surrounded by charts and documents that spoke of quarterly projections and market penetration. She'd transformed since midnight. Gone was the vulnerable woman who'd admitted desperation, replaced by the CEO who'd built an empire from determination and brilliant instinct. "You came," she said, genuine surprise in her voice, as if she'd expected him to disappear like smoke when daylight revealed the magnitude of what they were contemplating. Everything in this room cost more than Ryan's monthly salary, but her expression suggested she'd trade it all for what he might offer. "I came, but I have conditions." Ryan took the chair beside her, leather feeling foreign beneath him. "No questions about my background. No digging into who I am or where I learned Dutch." His voice carried quiet authority of someone who'd learned that survival sometimes required drawing lines in shifting sand. "And I leave by 2 p.m. to pick up my daughter from school. That's not negotiable." Hazel represented the only clean thing left in his life, his anchor to normal people doing normal things. At exactly 9 a.m., the Dutch Innovation Consortium filed into the conference room like well-dressed ambassadors from another world. Ryan recognized the type immediately. Old European money mixed with new technological vision, people who'd built empires on handshake deals and cultural understanding. They spoke rapid-fire Dutch that tested boundaries and probed for weakness. That's when Ryan proved his worth, becoming a bridge between worlds that spoke different languages even when using the same words. When consortium leader Henrik Vandenberg made a casual joke about American directness being refreshing, but occasionally dangerous, Ryan rendered it as gentle humor rather than cultural criticism. When financial terms grew complex, he bridged gaps between European formality and American pragmatism. By 11 a.m., the consortium was leaning forward, engaged. By noon, they were shaking hands on preliminary agreement worth $30 million over 5 years. Remarkable, Henrik said, eyes finding Ryan with appreciation. Your translator understands our thinking, not just our words. After the Dutch delegation departed, Adrienne and Ryan sat alone in sudden quiet. Documents between them represented 18 months of work finally bearing fruit, but neither seemed focused on business anymore. That wasn't just translation, Adrienne said finally. That was cultural artistry. You didn't just help them understand what I was saying, you helped me understand what they needed to hear. Her attention was focused entirely on the man who'd made it possible, the janitor who'd transformed into something far more sophisticated than circumstances suggested. Have coffee with me, she said, as Ryan gathered his notes. Just to debrief. Professional necessity. But they both knew it wasn't about business anymore. Something had shifted during those 3 hours. Some recognition that went deeper than employer and employee. The coffee shop buzzed with lunchtime energy, but their corner table felt isolated from chaos. Tell me about your daughter, Adrienne said, because it seemed safer than asking about shadows behind his eyes. Hazel. She's 10. Brilliant. Sees too much for her own good. Ryan's face softened when he spoke of her, years of weariness falling away. Lost her mother 3 years ago. Car accident. Since then, it's been us against the world. The admission slipped out before he could stop it. Private pain offered to someone who'd shown him respect when he'd expected dismissal. What about you? Someone waiting at home? The question was casual, but Adrienne caught the probe beneath it. No one, she said, honesty surprising her with its starkness. Work doesn't leave much room for people who want more than networking opportunities. She'd had relationships, but they'd withered under pressure of her ambitions, her inability to let anyone close enough to matter. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd learned to guard their hearts, studying each other across divides of circumstance and class. Around them, life hummed with ordinary dramas, but their table felt wrapped in strange intimacy of shared recognition. By Wednesday, Ryan had fallen into uneasy rhythm between two worlds. Mornings belonged to Pinnacle Tower, afternoons to Hazel and single parenthood. The boundary felt solid until Wednesday evening, when everything blurred. You look different, Hazel observed over dinner. Like you're trying to be someone else. Before Ryan could respond, his phone buzzed. Adrienne's name made his pulse quicken. Emergency. Dutch partners arriving tonight, not tomorrow. Need you at Union Club. Black tie. The Union Club occupied 3 floors of a building, old when Chicago was young. Ryan followed Adrienne through rooms reeking of tradition and masculine power, past portraits of dead industrialists whose eyes seemed to track their movement with ancestral disapproval. The private dining room had been transformed into extension of Amsterdam headquarters. Henrik Vandenberg and his team were already seated, conversation flowing in rapid Dutch that tested boundaries and established hierarchies. As evening progressed through courses that cost more than Ryan's weekly salary, he found himself doing more than translating, interpreting subtext, managing cultural expectations, smoothing power plays that could derail months of negotiations. When Vandenberg's phone rang during dessert, the conversation that followed made Ryan's blood turn cold. Military terminology, deployment schedules, Afghanistan operations. When Vandenberg hung up, he turned with smile that didn't reach his eyes. Military consulting calls never respect dinner schedules. You translate military communications beautifully, Mr. Kellerman. Vandenberg continued, gaze settling on Ryan with uncomfortable intensity. Such precision suggests personal experience. Most civilian translators struggle with technical terminology, but you handle them as if you've spent time in environments where getting details wrong could have serious consequences. The silence that followed felt like held breath. Ryan's hands remained steady, but Adrienne caught the almost imperceptible shift in his posture, shoulders straightening into something that looked less civilian, more military. "I appreciate clarity in all communications," Ryan said carefully. "Precision prevents misunderstandings that can be costly in any context." The response was diplomatic, but carried undertone of boundaries being established. "Indeed," Vandenberg replied, smile growing sharper. "Misunderstandings in military contexts can be particularly expensive. I've lost several contractors in Afghanistan over the years. Translation errors, mostly. The difference between advance and retreat can mean everything when lives hang in balance." "Tell me, Mr. Kellerman," Vandenberg pressed, each word precisely chosen to probe for cracks in Ryan's armor of anonymity. "How does a janitor develop such sophisticated understanding of military protocols? Such knowledge usually comes from direct experience, and direct experience tends to leave marks that are difficult to hide from people who know what to look for." The question hung like a blade, and Ryan felt his carefully constructed life beginning to tremble under scrutiny that threatened to expose secrets he'd spent 3 years learning to carry alone. Ryan's phone began ringing at 2:47 a.m. with aggressive insistence that suggested someone had moved beyond polite requests into territory of demands that wouldn't be ignored. He answered without checking caller ID, mind clouded with fragments of dreams that tasted like desert sand and metallic adrenaline. "Ryan Kellerman?" The voice was crisp, official, carrying accent that made his spine straighten with recognition. "This is Colonel Anders Hoffman, Netherlands Defense Ministry. I need to speak with you about Operation Mountain Eagle." The words hit like ice water. Outside his window, Chicago slept peacefully, unaware that the past had just kicked down his door. "I think you have the wrong number," Ryan said carefully, but military training had already overridden 3 years of civilian conditioning. "Sergeant Ryan Kellerman, 82nd Airborne Division, Army Translator attached to NATO Forces, 2016. Hoffman continued relentlessly. "Henrik Vandenberg contacted me. He recognized you at dinner." "What do you want?" Ryan asked, abandoning pretense that had been stripped away by forces beyond his control. "To warn you," Hoffman said, unexpected gentleness making Ryan's chest tighten. "Brandon Cross's sister has been asking questions through official channels, seeking access to classified reports about the operation where her brother died. She's been persistent, using considerable resources to pressure people who normally wouldn't respond to civilian inquiries." The name hit Ryan like physical blow, carrying weight of memories therapy had helped him manage, but never fully heal. By 6 a.m., Ryan stood in Adrienne's lobby, no longer wearing business attire that had marked him as temporary member of her world. He'd returned to jeans and simple shirt, claiming back identity of someone who worked with hands and asked for nothing more than honest pay. When Adrienne emerged from elevator, her step faltered. Something in his posture told her this wasn't about business anymore. "We need to talk. Now. Privately." Her office felt different this morning, less like power center, more like stage set waiting for final act. Ryan closed the door, then surprised her by checking windows with professional attention that suggested concerns about surveillance beyond corporate espionage. "You've been investigating me," he said, settling into chair with posture that had shifted from civilian politeness to military bearing under pressure. Not just casual curiosity, but actual investigation using resources most people don't have access to. Adrienne moved to window overlooking the city. From 38 floors up, Chicago looked manageable, subject to rules of logic and control that governed her business empire. "My brother died in Afghanistan. Operation Mountain Eagle, November 2016. I've been trying to get incident reports unsealed for 8 years. The silence behind her stretched like held breath. When she turned, Ryan's face had gone pale, but remained carefully controlled. Army liaison mentioned a translator attached to Brandon's unit, Sergeant Ryan Kellerman. They said he survived the ambush that killed my brother. She stepped closer, close enough to see small scars on his hands, tension in his jaw. I want to know what happened. I want to know why my brother died and his translator lived. The words came out rougher than intended. 8 years of questions and grief bleeding through professional composure. You think I chose who survived? Ryan's voice carried dangerous edge. You think I made some deal with fate? He stood slowly, moving to same window but maintaining distance. Brandon died saving people. 3 Afghan civilians and 2 other soldiers. He chose to go back into kill zone when any rational person would have run. The words came out like puzzle pieces Adrienne had been trying to solve for years, fragments forming picture she hadn't expected. Ryan's voice took on flat, factual tone of someone delivering rehearsed information. I was coordinating with local tribal leaders, trying to negotiate safe passage for our convoy. Brandon's squad was providing security while I worked with my interpreter to establish communications. Taliban had been monitoring our radio frequencies. They knew exactly when and where to hit us. His eyes focused beyond the window, beyond present moment. First IED took out our lead vehicle, small arms fire from 3 directions. Brandon saw the interpreter, my interpreter, Afghan man named Rashid, get hit by shrapnel. Rashid was bleeding out. 2 other civilians trapped in kill zone. Ryan's voice grew quieter. Brandon looked at me and said, Some people are worth the risk, Ryan. Cover me. I tried to stop him, told him risk was too high, that saving 3 people wasn't worth losing him. I grabbed his arm, told him to stay down, but he went anyway. And I followed him. Ryan continued, unable to meet her eyes. Not because I believed in mission, but because I couldn't let him go alone. Brandon reached Rashid first. Man was still alive, conscious enough to point toward 2 civilians trapped under debris. I was providing cover fire, trying to buy them time. That's when second IED went off. Command detonated device. Taliban had been waiting for someone to enter that specific area. His hands moved restlessly, as if they still held weapon. Under him, Ryan said when Adrienne asked about the explosion. He triggered it trying to reach civilians. Rashid died from wounds 20 minutes later. 2 civilians survived because Brandon's actions drew Taliban fire away long enough for rest of squad to extract them. The office felt too small suddenly, air too thin. 3 lives saved, 1 life lost. In Army's mathematics, that's successful outcome, but not in mine. The silence stretched between them, heavy with weight of truth and complexity of survival. I've hated you for 8 years, Adrienne said finally, voice barely audible. Hated that you survived when he didn't. Ryan's acceptance was complete and unexpected. I know. I've hated myself for same reasons. I'm learning not to, for Hazel's sake and for Brandon's. Hatred is luxury I can't afford anymore. Something shifted inside Adrienne's chest, tightly wound spring beginning to loosen. 3 weeks passed in strange suspension. Ryan returned to Janitor schedule, corridors feeling smaller than before. Hazel noticed change immediately, the way children do when adults carry new weight. You're sad again? She observed over breakfast. Before Ryan could respond, his phone buzzed with text from unknown number. Hazel accepted to Pinnacle Academy with full scholarship. Anonymous donor, congratulations. Ryan stared, reading 3 times before meaning sank in. Pinnacle Academy, where Adrienne served on board of directors. That evening, Ryan found himself outside academy gates, watching students emerge with casual confidence of people who'd never doubted their place in world. Hazel could have that confidence. This scholarship could change trajectory of her entire life. Irony wasn't lost. Adrienne had found way to honor brother's memory while helping daughter of man she'd spent 8 years hating. Meanwhile, 38 floors above city, Adrienne stared at architectural plans for Brandon Cross Memorial Veterans Center. On Friday, Willem van der Berg called again. Conversation in Dutch lasted nearly an hour, ranging from family updates to shared memories of military service. Willem understood particular weight veterans carried. "There's peace to be found," Willem said. "Not absence of pain, but presence of purpose. You helped save lives, Ryan. That matters more than ones you couldn't save." After hanging up, Ryan sat reviewing Hazel's homework while she worked on bridge construction project. "Why do bridges sometimes fall down?" Hazel asked. "Usually because they're carrying more weight than designed to handle," Ryan replied. "Or foundation wasn't strong enough. Can they be fixed?" "Sometimes, but usually better to learn from what went wrong and build stronger one." Monday brought unexpected visitor, Mrs. Patterson, with envelope carrying formal weight of life-changing news. Hand-delivered by man in expensive suit. Very insistent you receive it personally. Inside, Ryan found handwritten letter on Cross Dynamics letterhead, Adrienne's precise penmanship. "Ryan, I've been thinking about our conversation and what Brandon would want me to do with knowledge I now carry. Veterans Center needs director. Someone who understands both military experience and civilian world veterans must navigate. Position comes with living wage, benefits, opportunity to help others find their way home from wars that never really end. Choice is yours. No strings attached." 6 months later, Ryan stood at back of Pinnacle Academy Auditorium, watching Hazel accept award for Outstanding Achievement in International Studies. She delivered acceptance speech in 3 languages, English, Spanish, Dutch, young voice carrying confidence that had bloomed during months at prestigious school. One person in back row remained standing long after others settled. Adrienne Cross in simple navy dress, understated elegance commanding attention without ostentation. Their eyes met across crowded auditorium. Neither smiled, neither waved. Acknowledgement was smaller than nod, more subtle than recognition. Just brief meeting of 2 people who'd learned to carry each other's stories without burden of resolution. After ceremony, parents mingled in marble lobby. Young teacher approached Ryan with enthusiasm. "Hazel speaks beautifully about work you're doing at Veterans Center. She says you're helping people build bridges. She also mentioned her Dutch tutor is mysterious. Anonymous lessons. Someone who calls weekly speaks only Dutch for hour." Teacher laughed. "Remarkable how fluent she's become." Ryan's coffee paused halfway to lips. He'd arranged language lessons, but never asked who provided them. Watching Hazel demonstrate pronunciation to impressed relatives, he understood why her accent had developed particular precision of someone learning from native speaker. 20 minutes later, families filtered toward parking garage. Ryan found himself walking beside Adrienne toward elevators. Neither had spoken since eye contact in auditorium, but silence felt different. Not hostile or awkward, but full of things that didn't need saying aloud. "She's remarkable," Adrienne said as they waited. "Smart, curious, completely unintimidated by being scholarship kid among trust funds." They rode down in silence, city growing larger beyond glass walls. In parking garage, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh illumination that made expensive cars look ordinary. "Veterans Center is making difference," Adrienne said as they reached their cars. 97% job placement rate. Extraordinary. "People just need someone to believe they're worth saving," Ryan replied, echoing Brandon's words from 8 years before. "Once they believe it themselves, rest follows." They stood separated by 15 feet of concrete and weight of everything they'd learned about each other. "I should go," Adrienne said, but didn't move. "Early meeting tomorrow." "Of course." Ryan pulled keys but made no move to leave either. Silence stretched again, but this time felt like something they were both listening to rather than trying to fill. Questions lived in that quiet space that neither was brave enough to ask. Could two people shaped by same loss learn to exist in each other's orbit without gravity of grief pulling them into collision? Do you ever think about what Brandon would say? Adrienne's voice was quieter now, almost lost in parking garage acoustics. Ryan considered seriously, weighing years of therapy and slow work of learning to live with ghosts. I think he'd be proud of Sister building something that helps people. I think he'd be amused that his sacrifice created scholarship fund and veterans center instead of just another memorial. They drove out in opposite directions, Ryan toward Northside apartment, Adrienne toward high-rise condo. This was what healing looked like. Ryan realized navigating evening traffic. Not dramatic forgiveness scenes movies promised, but quiet recognition that some wounds stopped bleeding without fully closing. Some stories didn't end with reconciliation or romance, but with understanding that two people could carry pieces of same grief without binding them together or driving them apart. 3 months later, when Ryan received text reading Gelukkige Verjaardag on Hazel's birthday, he didn't respond but saved message. In downtown office, Adrienne continued building empire while quietly funding programs helping others build smaller victories. She never visited Veterans Center but read every report, approved every budget increase. On quiet Sunday mornings when Chicago's skyline caught light just right, both sometimes thought about young soldier who'd believed some people were worth risk, some sacrifices worth making, some bridges worth building even when you couldn't see other side. City hummed around them, full of people learning to carry complicated stories. In space between memory and possibility, between guilt and grace, two lives continued separate journeys on paths that occasionally crossed but never quite converged. Some distances were meant to be honored rather than closed. Some silences spoke louder than words. Some bridges weren't built to be crossed, but to remind us that connection was possible, even across spaces that couldn't be measured in simple miles or years.